good people don't smoke marijuana.
I've known Larry for a long time.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show. The medical marijuana for you and me. Ah, yeah, the medical marijuana. Whoa, 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 yeah, the medical. It's the medical marijuana show. You will know.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. This one is for Saturday, the 8th of December, 2018. I'm your host, Larry Love. We're here every week to bring you the latest information on the fight for medical and recreational cannabis. This plant has been helping people for thousands and thousands of years. We're sort of a digital history of our fight. We've been doing this for 10 years and 9 years now. We're going into our 10th year in a couple of weeks. So anyway, our guest today, great interview with Peter O'Toole from Michigan, also known as Uncle Pete. He's been helping patients and people for years there and fighting for the legalization of cannabis, both medical and recreational. Of course, adult use did go into effect this week in Michigan. We congratulate them, and we're going to talk all about that with Peter just after we have a lot of news. So we're going to do a lot of news for you right now. So let's get started with that. Speaking of Michigan, this was an advocate celebrating at the start of Michigan's recreational adult use just the other night on Thursday.
You know, we call it social consumption now. Back in the day, we called it Grateful Dead concerts. My first impulse when this subject comes up is to ask a rude question, which is, seriously, what is the fuss all about? Are we, and I say we, I mean mostly cities and towns, are we making such a big deal out of adults getting high together because marijuana seriously poses a serious threat to public health and public safety? Or are we making a big deal out of it because the demonization of marijuana has been official government policy since Nixon? And it's hard to expect people to accept the fact that the government has been lying about marijuana for all these years. Someone suggested the other day that maybe the big deal is that we're talking about adults who are strangers getting high together, not those who are friends. But you know, what we can all say to that is it won't be long because they'll be friends, right?
Yeah, it was very exciting. I watched some videos of even Uncle Pete put out a video that night celebrating, and it just I can't imagine what that feeling is. I know what it is for medical, and I hope that your state, my state, will go adult use very, very soon. We don't need to be putting people in jail for this plant. Let's move over to medical right now. There's a judge rejected a family's emergency petition to halt chemotherapy for their child. The government has taken over. They're not letting the parents do what they want. Listen to this.
Request denied. The family of a 13-year-old boy fighting a deadly form of leukemia won't be able to stop the treatment. His mother has been fighting to regain control of her son's medical care. News 4's Greg Sergel is in Central Islip. Greg, there are some strong opinions on both sides of this debate.
Indeed, there are, Stacy. And today, this was the second time in 4 days that the Gunderson family went before a judge in a desperate attempt to at least temporarily reverse a government action they say gives doctors and not the teen's parents control of his cancer care. Nicholas Gunderson stood with his mom and dad in family court today, sharing another disappointment as a judge rejected the family's emergency petition to halt Nicholas's daily chemotherapy treatments.
I don't need chemo because I don't have cancer in my body.
Gunderson's rare form of leukemia is said to be in remission, But as doctors here at NYU Winthrop Hospital insist the 13-year-old needs 40 more months of chemotherapy. When Nick's mom resisted and sought a second opinion from other doctors, Suffolk County's Child Protective Services seized custody of the teen. That move has blocked Candace Gunderson from making any decisions about her son's medical care.
It's very disturbing to me that the government has basically kidnapped my child.
Today, family supporters came to court wearing T-shirts reading "Justice for Nick," but the judge refused to grant the outcome they were all seeking.
The judge is not listening to the constitutional rights of these parents.
It's difficult because every time I get it, I always feel sick, and I don't want to feel sick if I don't have to feel sick.
I believe that in the end, justice will be served, and that we will be free to take Nicholas and take care of him properly.
Now, just a short time ago, Suffolk's Department of Social Services released a statement on today's denial by the judge. The statement reads, Child Protective Services is providing in accordance with the Suffolk Family Court order and will continue to do so to ensure that the child's medical needs are met. Now, there's a hearing on this case scheduled for December, and the family is hoping that will be the first step toward their regaining control of Nicholas's medical care. We're in Central Islip. Greg Sergel, News 4 New York.
Wow, you know, the government and sometimes friends and other people want to be our parents. No, parents are the parents of their children. They have first say and last say. Here's a child that is doing great on cannabis and in remission, and they're forcing chemotherapy. How insane is that? All right, let's move over what they say over the pond, over to England. Here's a woman who has become the first UK patient to get a cannabis prescription, they call it there.
At no point throughout those 6 years was there ever a moment where I wasn't in pain. I still was going to the black market, and I've still been in some states in agony, in the dark, meeting people on parks, going to meet people I've never met before in abandoned, industrial car parks, and in the middle of the night, in the dead of winter, when I'm on a walking stick and I've got nothing to protect myself. And potentially because I was sort of a younger age group, I sort of could feed into that sort of black market easier than maybe somebody that was in their 60s, But I got to the point where I was desperate. I was absolutely desperate. Nothing was cutting it. I was still in a lot of pain. And my friend brought some over and said, just smoke some before you go to bed and see what happens. So I did. And I can remember it so vividly. I sat outside on the step of my old house and I smoked some cannabis. And then I went up to bed and my other half was already in bed. And she said, are you all right? I said, yeah. I said, something's a bit weird. And then it clicked and I was like, I'm not in pain. I said, I can't feel pain anywhere. And she looked at me and I looked at her, and we didn't know what to do or say or think, because at no point throughout, sorry, I'm getting a bit upset. At no point throughout those 6 years was there ever a moment where I wasn't in pain. And that was a massive moment for me.
Okay, so that was what they're saying is the first UK patient to get a cannabis license, to use cannabis as medicine. But as we all know, and that we've been talking about for quite some time, GW Pharmaceuticals from the UK has put out some Sativex or Sativex. I'm not sure how they're pronouncing it, Epidiolex. But as we know, and we've been talking about, it's way too expensive. Here is a mom with MS who is using one of these GW pharmaceuticals, and it's just too expensive. It's cost prohibitive to use.
Hi, my name is Sally and I suffer from multiple sclerosis. I'm affected by symptoms such as spasticity, which my consultant neurologist has prescribed Sativex for. This is a drug that has changed my life. It not only affects the symptoms that it's prescribed for, but it has also enabled me to feel my little boy's hand in mine. The NICE Institute have said that for quality of life, it's not cost effective. So I won't be able to access this treatment on the NHS, and will have to pay £450 every month to access this.
That's a lot of money. That's like $4,500 a year or something for her to use that, and she can't use it. But as we know, we have the solution. We've been doing it for years. GW Pharmaceuticals has priced themselves out of helping really sick people. Things have to change. And things are trying to change. Here is the governor of Indiana, who is trying to work things out with the medical cannabis and so forth, but he wants the feds to act first. He's a little bit afraid, even though we've got 40-something states with medical cannabis programs.
Steps closer to medical marijuana here in the state. News 8 State House Bureau Chief David Williams spoke with Governor Holcomb today about the controversial subject.
Just a little while ago, I asked Governor Eric Holcomb if he's open to the idea of medical marijuana in Indiana.
Say the words and opinions flare. Lawmakers just can't agree. Indiana's Prosecuting Attorneys Council and Indiana's Chamber of Commerce are both against medical cannabis, while some lawmakers want to see it allowed in Indiana. Today, I asked the governor where he stands. So you're open to the idea of medical marijuana?
Medicinal, if it is a source that can be regulated, not an under-the-table cash business. Banks don't recognize the revenue right now. They're literally being paid in cash. That ought to tell you something.
Holcomb says right now, medical marijuana is illegal federally. He's glad U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams calls for more research.
I also would encourage the federal government, including the Department of Justice, to clarify this so states don't approach it as a hodgepodge way of collecting revenue.
Senate Democrats say they're going to ask Governor Eric Holcomb to make medical marijuana a priority for 2019. State Rep Jim Lucas, who's a Republican, says he is working on his own medical marijuana bill, which he wants passed in this next session. At the State House, I'm David Williams, Wish TV, News 8.
So these governors need to look to other states. I mean, it's been successful. We have great programs in different states. You know, why try to make a new mousetrap? Let's learn by the mistakes of other states and make new programs better and keep them changing. Part of medical and recreational use cannabis is having clean medicine. And we need testing. Yesterday I was at the Department of Health medical cannabis meeting here in New Mexico, where they were trying to make some changes, add some conditions like Alzheimer's and so forth, which has been passed a few times, but the Attorney of Health here in New Mexico has nixed that. So hopefully with our new administration we will get Alzheimer's on the list of approved conditions for cannabis next year. But testing. We have a medical program here in New Mexico and other states, and there's no mandatory testing for heavy metals and pesticides. I mean, that's ridiculous. People have, immune systems that are compromised. So in Sacramento, a marijuana testing lab has been shut down due to falsifying reports. How bad is this for our industry? Wow.
It's one of only 4 marijuana testing labs in Sacramento, and now it's shut down.
They told us they saw an irregularity in the reports being submitted.
Stephen Dutra is the general manager of Sequoia Analytical Labs. Last Tuesday, investigators from the Bureau of Cannabis Control found the lab's director, Mark Foster, had been falsifying reports since July. Not a single batch of marijuana inspected here was tested at all for 22 specific pesticides that they're required to be checked for.
We were told by our lab director that all these new pesticides had been set up and all was going well with that. And of course, we found out last Tuesday that was not the case. As ownership and management, we were blindsided by this.
Dutcher says his lab director, Foster, was let go the next day, but the damage had been done. He estimates about 700 batches of pot, 50 pounds each, have been shipped out without proper lab testing. And tracking down all that cannabis won't be easy.
If we ever find that a product has not passed lab testing or is contaminated, we'll pull it from the shelves right away.
A few years ago, many dispensary owners like Kimberly Cargile dealt directly with Sequoia Lab and could easily track all the marijuana in her shop tested there. But today, because of new state rules, it's now distributors that make sure all of her product is lab tested. She has no idea which labs test which products. And Sequoia ships out to between 30 and 40 different distributors, according to Dutra. Essentially, now the state will treat this situation like a recall.
We just, see products that come on the market and that are recalled, and this may happen in our industry also.
Cargile says she's just thankful the Bureau of Cannabis Control caught the mistake. Dutra says Sequoia Labs will fully cooperate with the state and hopes to get its operating license back by January 1st, this time with a new lab director.
The lab director is our top guy. I think if there's a lesson learned is that top guy should not be operating any particular tests, but should be overseeing them only.
So we put a phone call in and we reached out on social media to Mark Foster, that lab director. He didn't get back to us at all. And we also reached out to the Bureau of Cannabis Control to see where they are with this investigation, but they told us they had no further comment about the situation tonight. Eric Sincere?
All right, Joe, obviously we're talking about pesticides here. So how often is it that pot is found to contain pesticides? How big of an issue are we really talking about here?
Could be serious.
Yeah, it could be serious. There very well could be no contamination whatsoever, though. There's about 97% of the marijuana that gets tested goes through without having found any sort of contamination or pesticide. So hopefully that's the case, and all of this marijuana that was tested improperly would still be safe. But again, there is a 3% chance that that's in fact not the case. So they're going to go through, the state will, with this investigation and recall whatever products they can find that were not tested properly at this lab, just to make sure anybody consuming it stays safe.
Okay, so it's a medical industry, at least most of them are right now. But we don't want people in the recreational adult use industry, users to be using bad medicine either. So there certainly is a need for testing, and it needs to be clean. Anyway, it's a real medicine, cannabis. That's my point. And this next piece, experts are seeing a strong need for insurance for cannabis industry. Now, of course, there needs to be insurance to cover the cost of medical cannabis for patients. It's a medicine just like the medicines that you get at CVS and Walgreens. So there should be no tax on it, and there should be insurance for it. So here is this story about an expert saying, yeah, we need insurance.
I think if you were to ask, just a emergency room physician, for example, 5 years ago, whether or not he or she needed coverage, separate coverage for cannabis-related, wrongful acts or risks, the answer would be probably not. But I think these days, certainly in California, physicians who, are not in the practice of making recommendations for medical cannabis, nevertheless are seeing more and more patients who are using cannabis medicinally, either through a doctor's recommendation or perhaps self-treating. Maybe they're now, adult use consumers who are just, going out and finding cannabis on their own. And we're seeing more and more issues of, interactions, overlay where you've got, in the past it may have been a patient that, just has a drug history of maybe marijuana and cocaine, but now that patient may be, adding CBD or marijuana to their panel of medications, and maybe there's overlay with mental health issues or substance abuse. So it can be really difficult for physicians now to kind of tread those waters, get informed consent, adequately advise their patients, and in some cases even offer CBD or marijuana instead of opiates, for example. And then there's other issues that are coming out for doctors. For example, there's a syndrome called cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. And this is a syndrome that we're seeing more and more now, and a lot of physicians aren't educated on it, but basically it's heavy pot users tend to have high levels and concentrations of cannabinoids in the system, and it can actually make them ill. It can make them nauseated. And so the patient comes in and, the report is, well, I've been nauseated, I feel bad, and the doctor will say, well, okay, what'd you do about it? Well, I said, I smoked a lot of pot because I thought it'd help, with my nausea. And, it's a vicious cycle. Some physicians are not aware of that problem, but we're seeing a number of those reported cases now in California.
So besides, patients needing the insurance, so do dispensaries and grow ops, and there are some people that are, some insurance companies that are now insuring the cannabis industry, meaning, the growers and so forth. So there's going to be malpractice suits. There's going to be everything. This is an industry just like all the others. All right. So before we take a break and talk to Uncle Pete, Peter O'Toole, and that's Peter right there. We need to have a little levity before we take our break. And so here is Fox and Friends, a news story, a news show in the morning, Fox and Friends, claiming that marijuana gummies are killing people. Sit back and listen.
Charges after handing out gummies laced with marijuana to fellow students during gym class.
Those gummies contained 100 milligrams of THC, the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. 5 of those students who ate those pot-laced candies were rushed to the hospital.
Joining us right now with his warning for parents in Polk County, Florida, of course, Florida, is Grady Judd. He's the sheriff there. Sheriff, there's so many states that are considering this, whether it's medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. This is a warning signal. What is your warning?
Well, I'm not a prophet and I don't have a crystal ball, but I've been telling people in the state of Florida for years that whenever you take a substance like marijuana,
this is a cop, by
and
the
you
way,
put the THC into gummies, it's going to end up in children's hands. And when you look at the package, it's called the Green Hornet. It is packaged and marketed toward children. So what did we end up with? We ended up with 6 12-year-old children who overdosed on Green Hornet gummies full of marijuana.
Right.
That's right. They were stoned. They got very sick. 5 of them were transported to the hospital by ambulance.
Sheriff, do we know, did this kid know they were marijuana-based, or did he think it's just candy? And if so, did he take him to the gym class because it's like, hey, look what I got? Or was it just an accident?
No, it wasn't an accident at all. He knew exactly what it was. It was a complete package, 100 milligrams of gummies. They're divided up or segmented into 10 individual doses for adults, sold legally in California, and somehow it made its way here. He's given us 2 or 3 stories about how he came upon this complete package. But he told another buddy, I'm taking it to school to sell it. Well, the 6 kids overdosed. The 6 of them had doses for 10 adults. And you can see the end results weren't good.
Sheriff, I'm thinking 12 years old. We were 6th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade then. I mean, you're just learning about life. No one's even thinking about, you haven't even kissed a boy at that point. How in the world are you seeing more of this where kids, not even teenagers, they're 12, where they're getting their hands on drugs?
Exactly. They're 12 years old, and they devoured this bar of gummies. But think about it for a minute. If this is truly medicine for the very sickest, why are we packaging it for children? Why are we calling it Green Hornet? And it stung all of those kids really hard. And by the way, we have stung the one kid that sold it with 6 felony counts, but we're looking to see where it came from. He's given us 2 or 3 different stories. But that's what's frightening, and that should be the overarching message.
And the other
These
thing
weren't
is,
even teenagers.
But no one talks about this. THC is addicting. People I know so many people, they say they were told one thing and they end up getting addicted to it. And that's an addicting substance. There is a price to pay for pot.
There absolutely is a price to pay for pot. You know, I spent my entire
should be
adult
about
life
$3
in
a
law
gram.
enforcement, and a lot of it investigating traffickers of drugs. And it's not a minor nonviolent felony. It's ruining families and killing people every day across the United States. And we stand here in denial, thinking that it's not a gateway drug to drugs that's killing
you don't start
people.
on cocaine. You probably start with marijuana, and it leads to other things, right?
That's absolutely right. And still today, we have a meth problem across this state and country. If someone's in possession of meth, they're in possession of marijuana because it kind of cuts the edge of the meth. And then they use the marijuana and the meth, and they go out and kill themselves or overdose or kill someone else.
Right. Well, nonetheless, these particular gummies and the edibles are legal in other states, but, obviously in the state of Florida, it is not condoned for recreational use. Sheriff Grady Judd, Polk County, Florida. Sir, thank you very much.
Sheriff Grady Judd. Wow, what an a-hole he is. Making up stuff. Why do people just make up falsities? I guess it's just to scare people. Well, we're going to talk to Uncle Peter O'Toole, right after this little break, and he's been out there in Michigan fighting for the legal use of cannabis for medical and adult use, and we're going to talk about that and about his fight. We'll be right back after this.
It's all about the 420 MMJ Radio. The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana radio show.
Hey, this is Scott from Rare Dangness. You're listening to Medical Marijuana Radio.
And we're back. And online from Michigan, I have Peter O'Toole, also known as Uncle Pete or just Pete. He's a husband, a father, and an entrepreneur. In that order, he says. And today is the day, we're recording this on Thursday, that Michigan went for adult use, and it started. So how does it feel to be in an adult use state after all these years, Pete?
Absolutely wonderful. You know, it's been a lifetime of work that's come to a head here, and I think we've still got some work to go. I don't think what we have represents absolute freedom for the plant or for the user, but it's monumental nonetheless. And after 30 years of effort on my part as an individual and many, many others, it's an absolute, it's just surreal, you know?
So what is it that you think needs to be changed, since that's the first thing you brought up? So do you have grow rights there? That's one of the most important things.
Absolutely. Well, we do right now. They're attempting in Lansing currently in the lame duck session to gut the law, so to speak, with a 3/4 majority, which is pretty common for them to do here in Michigan and other places. But here they're specifically going after the home grow itself. I don't believe they're going to accomplish that, but that's one of our main concerns. And when I say that it's not as free as it should be, what I mean by that is there's still plenty of room for a lot of arrests to take place, and a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of people are still going to be in jail over this plant. You know, it's going to be a lot less than it was, but it's certainly not free like a tomato. You know.
Well, and of course that's what everybody's working towards. But you know, it's all, look, people should not go to jail for this plant, just like you said. So if they're legalizing for adult use, I don't understand why there's not protections in there. Also, aren't you having some problems where you have a new governor and they're trying to change the rules and take some of his power away, like they're doing in another state near you?
Well, actually, we've got the bad governor on the way out and the good governor on the way in. Both our governor and the attorney general-elect are both pro-marijuana. My attorney, Michael Camoran, actually worked pretty closely with Dana Nessel there on her campaign. And she's all about, as well as the governor, getting the old records expunged and things like that. Some of the things that were not included in our law, we're expunging the old records and releasing prisoners and stuff like that. So we have a very favorable environment for that based on who we've elected, but we're looking for that to come to light.
Well, that's really important stuff. Also, what about people that have had arrests or records in the cannabis industry? Are they allowed to work in the cannabis industry?
You know, in the medical side, no. A felon can only grow for themselves as a patient. With the recreational law, I don't know how those new licenses aren't being available to apply for a year. So right now, the way the law stands is you can legally have marijuana, but there's nowhere to legally access it, essentially, unless somebody gifts it to you. You can't go to the store and buy it as a recreational user yet. So a lot of those things are undetermined at this point. And then even further than that, each municipality is going to have the right to add their own rules and regulations on top of this. So,
Wow. So right now, look, your medical program has been really weird over the years. I had a friend that lived in Michigan, and I was sort of watching it for a while. There were dispensaries popping up that were getting busted and so forth. So is the medical industry protected? Is it still going to go, or are all the medical dispensaries that are currently operating just switching over to rec? What's going to happen to medical in Michigan?
Well, we've got, before recreational took place, what we had was a provision of our medical marijuana law. They got the majority in the Lansing there, and they rewrote part of the law. And part of that was very much in our favor. It defined concentrates and oil is legal. It set limits for different things like liquids versus solids versus gases and things of this nature. And most of that went in our favor as patients and caregivers. But they also, and then at the same time, because the original law didn't have any language in it that allowed dispensaries, most of those dispensaries were operating on what we call a Section 8 defense. There wasn't a clear-cut path for them to operate. It was just a lot of real gutsy, ballsy individuals that opened up all those dispensaries. So the result was the ones that were friendly with local legislators and may have been had a relationship with law enforcement and stuff got left alone, and the ones that were the competition got nailed. It was kind of my take on it. But never was there a clear path for these dispensaries to stay open. So there are some that are still open, many that have been shut down. What they're doing is they're kind of operating in a gray area right now, and they're waiting for their licensing that goes along with that new legislation that came through. At the same time that they defined all those limits for oils and stuff, they laid down a pathway for these stores to acquire their licensing. Now, to acquire those licenses, you need to have $500,000 in the bank that's liquid. You need to, have a business plan. It's for the big boys. It's not for the little guys. So that's.
Let me just interrupt. What's going to happen to medical? Will there be a medical program, or will it just be recreational? And what are the taxes that have been approved on rec right now? What's going to be when they open up rec dispensaries, tax-wise?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, to answer the first question, I guess the medical program is absolutely intact and separate. It operates as its own entity, so to speak, versus the rec. Much like Colorado, there'll be medical dispensaries and there'll be recreational dispensaries when this is all said and done. What we're in now is that period of gray area where none of the licensing has gone through, and they haven't really worked out all of those details yet. So the second part of that question would be, what does rec look like in the form of taxes? We've got a 6% sales tax here in Michigan. In addition to that, they'll add 10%. So that's pretty cut and dry. It'll be a 16% sales tax. 10% of that will go to the marijuana account, so to speak, where they'll divide it up between schools and wherever they've got that money allotted.
Right. So what divisions of government are running the rec program when that starts licensing and so forth? Is it going to be the same people that are overseeing the medical, or are they two separate divisions of government?
I'm 90% sure on this one. I hate to answer something I'm not sure of, but I'm almost certain that it's LARA, that's the Department of Government, that's running both rec and the medical. But those are two different boards, separate people in the same department, I think. And I'm not 100% on that, so I don't want to go too far.
Right. And so one of the great, I think, aspects of the adult use law in Michigan is that you can gift. So tell me about that. I think that's just really wonderful.
Absolutely. And what that does is allow somebody like me, who's known very well for gifting cannabis oil to a lot of people, it allows me to be a little bit more open and more importantly, it allows people to feel a little more comfortable even trying something like that. And I'll give you a perfect example. I've got a friend that served 20 years in the military, did a few tours. He came home with PTSD and about 23 prescriptions. Well, for the last 5 years, he's been retired. His wife's still working for the VA, and he's been using a little bit of marijuana in the back room, so to speak. And it's helped him quite a bit with different things. So, but he still had that stigma. He was still scared to death to get arrested with it or get in trouble or be open about it or talk to anybody because of his position and his wife's position. So the minute that we passed legalization, it wasn't but a couple days that he came over to my house to visit me. And just pulling in the driveway and coming into the house, his heart was racing. He was all worked up. He was scared to death because of these 40 years of hell that we've been through in regards to marijuana, for lack of a better way of putting it. So just to see the relief in him, and him being able to be comfortable enough to just pull in my driveway and have a conversation. And by the time we got done with that conversation, he had a lot of hope in him, and he was looking towards the future and already had plans to reduce certain prescriptions and to get his life back, so to speak. So, when it comes to the recreational, we really still look at this from a medical perspective. It just opens up my opportunity to educate more people because we believe that all use is medical use.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody seems to believe that. And we didn't know that it was medical use, but it turns out that it really is. Because, when I started using this plant 50 years ago, I didn't think anything about medical, but, I've hardly had any time, without using the plant in 50 years. So I'm really, sort of an example that I can have a life, I can work, and it's not the stoner persona that people think. The old thing that we used to get back in the day was you're going to burn out, you're burning out your brain cells. And
Right.
what we know now is that cannabis and cannabinoids actually cause neurogenesis, which is the rebuilding of brain cells, and it may end up even being a great Alzheimer's treatment and so forth. So the future is just really, really bright. But go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in there. I've got some thoughts I'd like to share. When it comes to connecting pathways in the brain that aren't connected before, I think the most profound evidence we've got of that is I've got a handful of people living with autism, young adults, teenage children, and things like that, that on the very first dose or second dose of cannabis oil, $1 worth of oil, these completely nonverbal individuals looked their parents in the eye for the first time and spoke. And we've seen that multiple times, so without a doubt, there's some pathways that are blocked with a nonverbal autistic person that are being opened up almost instantaneously with cannabis. And we've seen it over and over again. And to apply that on down the road to so many other different conditions and cases, it just becomes more and more obvious that while we may not understand exactly what's taking place in the brain there, very few things penetrate the blood-brain barrier to begin with. And we know that cannabis does because it affects us, gets us high. Well, beyond that, we also see great evidence of pathways that haven't worked before or have never worked connecting, in these people with autism. So, the power of cannabis is just absolutely mind-blowing when you really get down into it and you see it firsthand.
Watching some of the videos and stories online about some people on the autism spectrum just, sort of waking up, almost like that movie with Robin Williams many years ago. I get the chills when I see that stuff. It's just an amazing thing, and what we're going to learn now that we're going to be able to do studies and trials and so forth, even though they've been doing them for 50 years in Israel and other places in Europe and so forth. It's just really, really going to be exciting. So, but you have been just out front and advocating for many, many years, and it's not always been that easy for you. So tell me what happened today in the mail and how that affects you and moving forward.
Well, I got my what they call a nulli today in the mail. It's a nulli prosque or something like that. It's a Latin word that I don't pronounce very well, but it's short term is nulli, so we'll call it that. And what a nulli means, and when you have a case and you're fighting it, is that they didn't just dismiss the case because of say a bad search warrant, or we didn't file, obviously we filed many, many motions, but in the end, what they did is they actually withdrew the case as if they made a mistake, which meant that we automatically got our stuff back. We didn't have to file a civil suit. It was the best possible victory that we could have had.
What were they trying? What were they trying to get you? What was the case about?
We had very legal medical marijuana grown in a place called Boys Blank Island. We were raided in 2 different locations up there, 2 different locations on the mainland here in Michigan. That's a very long story. But in the end, we were charged, myself, my wife, Christy O'Toole, and my partner at the time and best friend, Jennifer Cook. We were charged with manufacturing marijuana with intent to deliver, operating a drug house, and then we were also threatened with several other charges throughout our case that never came to light, like producing an analog drug they were trying to hit us with for making cannabis-infused coconut oil capsules. So
when did you find out that this was going to be dropped? just today, or did you know it was coming?
No, we got notice on November 13th, I believe it was, from my attorney. We had a court date that following Friday. I had applied a lot of pressure to everybody involved, and pretty much just absolutely was refusing to go to court. Not that that really meant anything, but through that pressure, we managed to get the attorneys to do what they do best and make that deal in the back room, so to speak.
Well,
and unfortunately, when you fight these things, that's exactly how it works. What happens in the court in the case has nothing to do with how you win it. It's all in the back room. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that. I'm sure you're going to have a great night's sleep tonight. And by the way, I saw you go live last night at midnight when things went legal. Have you been to sleep yet today, or are you still celebrating?
Oh, I got about an hour and a half this morning before we came out for the event. And real quick about that case, one thing I want to point out, I'm in a very small club here in Michigan. That's the third felony case that I've beaten since I've become legal. And in this case, we were far underneath our limits. We were legal for 72 plants. We had 42 plants, things of this nature. So, there's been an extreme effort by law enforcement over the last 10 years to take me down, so to speak. And this last one, they used the United States Coast Guard, several different municipalities, a couple different task forces, and they hit me in 2 counties, 4 locations, so on and so forth. They spent, I would guess, including the helicopters they put in the sky after me and all the tails and everything that they had during the course of this investigation, and the amount of money they spent on the court case itself, showing up with 9, 10 federal officers at a time. I would say they spent damn near $500,000 trying to prosecute me on this case alone.
Wow, what a waste of funds and time, and for this plant to try to get somebody who's helping people and giving and donating and giving away and so forth. So the oil, obviously the oil is a really that's really the medicine. Okay, I mean you can get great results for certain conditions, but the oil, it seems to work for so many people. Are there certain strains over the years that you find work better? For the people that you were helping, that you like to grow?
The short answer is yes. But more importantly, it's probably one of the most common questions that we get. And when we start talking about marijuana strains, the first thing we got to understand is that they've never been defined. In other words, all the different strains of tomatoes that are out there, there's, let's say, 500 different kinds. They've been defined by the genetic code, and they've been registered and trademarked and all this good stuff. So there's no doubt that a Roma tomato is a Roma tomato, basically. So when we start talking about marijuana, it's never been defined. It's never been cataloged. So it's been relying upon the word of mouth, so to speak, system, the honor system. So as a result, what I'm growing and calling White Widow here might be completely different than what my neighbor's growing and calling White Widow. So my best answer to that is most of us don't have 100 different strains in front of us that are all top quality anyway. So if we really focus on the highest quality product that we can achieve, and we like to use 4 or 5 different strains for a full spectrum type approach. And when we do that, it seems to be the best medicine for the most people most of the time. Now from there, we can certainly make some adjustments, and we would know some characteristics about different strains being better for different things, whether it's migraines or helping with hunger or helping with anxiety or something that knocks you down more than picks you up. But that really comes down to individual gardens and individual experience with your strains, because I can't compare my strain to your strain.
Right. Well, of course, we don't know when you're getting seeds. You don't really know what you're buying and so forth. Now, you have a project that you're doing right now that has to do with seeds in Michigan. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we just fired up the Michigan Marijuana Seed Club. I've been a breeder for many years, just on a private level and on a hobby level. Back a few years ago, when I still had Seed to Cure going, I went to buy a pack of seeds. I was at an event, and the guy tried charging me $120 for 6 seeds. And I was a little offended. I'd paid good money for seeds before, but this was just Joe Blow that packed up some seeds and some packaging that he printed off his computer trying to charge me $120. And so after I went home from that event, I couldn't help I couldn't help but keep thinking about that. So I came up with this buck of bean idea, and I realized that with my experience breeding, that I can put 5,000 to 10,000 seeds on a plant, and if I can get a buck of bean out of them, I'm making more money on seeds than I ever did on wheat. So when you apply that mentality, and as long as you've got a reputation of to go with it like I do, and you don't have to spend all them 6 figures to market yourself because you're nobody. You can afford to sell seeds for $1 a bead. Now, all these guys that are these bigger breeders and these bigger companies, they're spending big money to take part in all these high times cannabis cup competitions and everything else. They're spending 6 figures to market their stuff. They've got to charge $100 a pack. So, and there's good and bad to both, I think, but if you can find a local breeder like me that you can trust and you can see, the proofs in the pudding, I'm selling the seeds from the stuff that I grow. So it's not too complicated.
Sure. So tell me about your club and how people can get involved in it and what do they get and so forth. I think
absolutely. Our website is at MichiganMarijuanaSeeds.org. It's free to join. All you got to do is register with your email address or your Facebook account. And once you register, you've got access to all of our free online courses. There's some basic, intermediate, and advanced courses for everything from how to start seeds to how to start clones all the way through harvest, including how to make oil, how to infuse foods, and all of these things. And what we've done is we put that up there. This isn't me presenting myself as a master grower, but obviously I'm very accomplished in this field, and I've put up everything how I do it, my formulas, exactly what I do with my 6 strains that are featured on the website. And there's a lot of people that are interested in that information. So it's a great resource for somebody that's looking for to save a lot of time sifting through and sorting through all those strains. Which ones do I grow? Well, I've been doing this for all my life, and these are the 6 strains that I've come down to. So a lot of people are very willing to pick up that ball and run with it. Sure. And to support that, I show everything that I've done for over the last few years in the program that I've evolved into. So it's a very simple, easy way for somebody to get started way ahead of the program,
Sure. And we're talking about Michigan residents only, right?
Well, anybody in the world can join the website for free and have access to all that information. Now, Michigan residents over 21 can join as a paid member if they like. And as a paid member, they gain access to our private events that we're doing once a week or so in different cities of the state. And at those private events, we'll have our personal chef that's going to be preparing some real fancy food all day long for us. Access to those seeds, clones, and different things that everybody's looking for.
So are you at liberty to tell us what these 6 strains are? Are they ones that we would know, or are they just stuff that you've been crossing over the years?
No, absolutely. Most of them are fairly well known. My oldest and greatest strain is Double Bubbleberry. That's from a seed company called Sagramartha. I've been growing it for almost 10 years now. I've got THC Bomb. That's another 8-week strain. Double Bubble is an 8-week strain. THC Bomb, I don't remember where that came from. There's like 13 different companies that put that out, so I'm not sure which one I ended up with. And then from there, I've got Cuvée. Cuvée is another 8-week strain by TGA Subcool. It's my personal favorite. It's just a tutti fruity piece of heaven. It just makes your mouth water.
Nice.
Another 8-week strain I've got would be the Green Crack. We don't like the name crack very much, but I didn't name it. And it's probably one of our most potent strains. It's pushing almost 30% over and over in lab tests.
Oh, well, speaking of that, tell me, what's the lab situation and testing situation in Michigan? What's going on there with that?
We've got a handful of labs here, but I'm up in northern Michigan. I don't have anyone that's real close to me or convenient. The lab that I had a relationship for years with, we had some integrity issues, and I'll just leave it at that. So I didn't trust the lab anymore. And to be honest, I haven't had a great need for a lab up to this point. But I look forward to finding the right one and establishing a relationship with them. There's Justin Palmatier is a good friend of mine. He's got a lab here in Michigan. He'd probably be I forget the name of his lab. He's going to kick my butt, but that's all right. That would be where I would go, or where I'm headed next, I should say.
Right. So what's the law for testing in medical and rec?
I'm not sure. As far as I know, everybody can test now. I know with medical, anybody with a card could get stuff tested.
I know, but is it mandatory? Is it mandatory for the licensed people that will be licensed and that
absolutely,
are currently?
Yes. Those are all the things that they're working on right now is for those licenses, whether it needs to be tested or not. And then it's kind of absolute they need to be tested. But then more importantly, and something I wanted to bring up earlier, is they're trying to establish limits for all these different things. In other words, how many milligrams of THC can be in different medibles and things of this nature. Well, their limits are so low that, like a brain cancer patient, some of the patients that I work with on a daily basis, take anywhere from 1,000 to 4,000 milligrams of THC a day, and these folks are talking about such low limits they'd have to eat a chocolate bar the size of the table to get that much.
Right.
You know?
Well, that's been happening. Let me just
so-
interrupt real quick. Because this has been happening in other states, and it's a big problem. That's why I'm fighting to separate medical programs from the rec programs, because people that are fighting cancer, they need, like what you just said, X amount of high milligrams of high THC a day and 3 times a day and so forth to beat what they're trying to beat. But in the rec world, everybody's concerned, and rightfully so, that people trying medibles for the first time, edibles. They're having like a 10 milligram max per piece and so forth, and it doesn't work for medical patients. So there really needs to be in the rules, and people like you and I need to fight for the medical people to have stronger medicine, because the needs of medical patients are way different than the needs of recreational users. So
I agree wholeheartedly, but I got to introduce this thought. The laws and the legislators seem to have a way of really choosing words that oppose each other, and I guess I'll get right to it. If you look at the word, the term recreational, there's, and we replace that with the right to use marijuana for any reason, or just a basic human right to use marijuana, whether it's medical or not. I mean, now that it's free for anybody to use marijuana in Michigan over the age of 21, should it matter whether they're medical or not, and as to why they're going to the store to purchase marijuana? And if all use is medical use, I understand illegally, and because of the legislation, the way that it's been designed and the way that it's been worded, we automatically put these two things as two separate categories. But that goes completely against the logic of all use is medical use as well. So I don't know what the solution is there, because you're talking about a legal world versus a practical world.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a new thought process to me just this morning, actually. And I don't know where I stand there, but I think there's some validity to that.
Well, my feeling is this, and I've seen it already, okay? In some states that have adult use, let's call it adult use, that sounds better than recreational, right?
Sure.
The taxes are so high that it's cost prohibitive for medical patients who need that oil and need certain types of edibles, because they can't eat, and sprays and patches and all that stuff. It's two different. Look, all use is medical, except for the people that are really using it medically need better product, stronger product, less expensive because of the taxes. So there are things that we can put into place to make the medical survive and help the people that really need help, and the ones that people that want to go to adult use dispensaries. I mean, they get what they need, okay? But the needs really are different, Pete, and I'm hoping that you and other people in Michigan will fight for the needs of medical, because if there had been no medical program in California in 1996 and all the other states that were up into the 30s or 40s now, we wouldn't be as far as we are in such a short period of time, from the time that medical went into effect in 96 to adult use in 2012 or whenever it was that Colorado and Washington passed. So we really owe the medical industry, the medical cannabis people that have been fighting for medical all these years, we owe them a debt of gratitude, and these adult use programs should have some money going to support the medical programs, because there should be no tax on medical cannabis. I go to CVS and Walgreens to get my heart medication or some other stuff. I don't pay tax, so we shouldn't be paying tax either.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the medicine that's required and the quality that's required for somebody that's fighting cancer or something serious is far above and beyond your everyday user. And I guess in Michigan here, we've had the medical program for so long, and it's secure as its own entity for now. It'd be a little different than if we had a recreational law without the medical program, and we're trying to operate within that. So, when you start talking about things like this, it's very easy for me to fall into my spoiled place here in Michigan, and I'm quick to forget that the rest of the country isn't in this position. So,
right, look what happened.
At the end of the day, go ahead.
Look what happened to Washington State. There's no medical anymore. It just disappeared, and we don't want that to happen in other states. We really don't. Go ahead, Pete.
No, not at all. Not at all. And, I guess that's one good thing about our recreational program is it does include the oil and the concentrates and allows you to have up to 15 grams and to gift up to 15, which is a significant amount. It's not quite as much as what we'd like, but it's more than just what you're going to find in a certain edible. So on the opposite side of some of those limits that they're putting out there, they're still allowing the pure oil to be in possession. So I think that's important to recognize too from a medical perspective.
Can a patient who wants to use this medically go to a dispensary and get oil?
They will be, but once again, it's going to be a year before those licenses are even available. So right now, we're just in a position where we can use marijuana recreationally. We can have it gifted to us if we don't have a medical card, but you can't buy it anywhere. You can't sell it anywhere. You can't sell it to anyone. So much like a lot of other places, sure, it's legal, but you can't buy it or sell it. It's for the adult use or the recreational.
Gotcha.
What the medical program, we've got an entire different set of protections where we can be compensated for our medicine, and it's not considered payment for drugs or however the hell it's worded, I forget. But essentially, we can be compensated, and it's not it doesn't constitute the sale of a controlled substance. There we go.
All right. Well, so you're launching your new project, which is the Michigan Marijuana Seed Club, and you can get there by going to MichiganMarijuanaSeeds.org. And you told us about that a few minutes ago. You have courses and events and seeds and so forth. Just rehash that for me. And I don't mean rehash, but one more time about your seed club.
I'm going to give you a little bit of a long version, if that's okay.
Sure.
Back in the day, when marijuana first became legal for medical use, of course, I went out and I got my card and stuff, and I was all excited. But much like you described, I had no idea the true medicinal powers of cannabis and so on. But what I did recognize at a very young age was the power of cannabis to bring people together. And I thought that was something that was pretty awesome. I knew that many times in my life I was standing there smoking a joint with somebody that I may have never had a conversation with. We didn't have that joint in common. So early on, I started Cannabis Camp, and that was a place to just celebrate that freedom. And it was there that very early on, after just throwing a few events, that I became very, very ill over a period of time. And at 38 years old, I was diagnosed with liver cancer, hepatitis C, and diabetes all on the same day. So things weren't looking real good for Uncle Pete that day.
Boy, that's a lot of stuff in one day. Wow.
Gave me 5 years to live. They wanted to do liver surgery and chemotherapy and all kinds of nasty stuff, possibly wake up with a colostomy bag and things that I wasn't really willing to participate in. So it was out of that desperation that I made my first batch of cannabis oil. So, the very first batch of cannabis oil saved my life. I shared it with a few other people. It had a very profound impact. And if you look back at some of my history, you'll see some of those videos back from Amy Jo and Fang and a few of these other people. And I won't go into those stories. But most importantly, I guess I discovered right then and there that my absolute favorite thing in the whole world, which was cannabis, was now the most powerful medicine in the whole world. I watched my liver go back down to size. I watched my liver panels come back down in the normal range. I watched my diabetes go away. I was knocking on death's door after 30 years of hepatitis C and not realizing it.
So what was the routine? What was the protocol that you were using? That taking the oil or whatever you were using to make your liver get better and your diabetes go away. I'm hoping it went away. So what were you using and how often were you using it? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the best part about cannabis oil and being an oil maker is it's so simple because every treatment is the same just about. We start off with a small dose or a starter dose and we work our way up until we get that desired result. And that seems a little simplistic, but it is that simple. But generally speaking, a gram a day would be considered a full dose for a cancer patient or just about anyone. Now, there are some rare cases of people that have severe MS and stuff where they get up to 2, 3, 4 grams a day. And that's how much they need, but those are the exception, not the rule. So a gram a day is where we're headed to. But what we do is we start out with a 1/10 of a gram or a 20th of a gram, a real small amount. And we start taking that. And as we take those initial doses, we get a little bit of experience with how it's going to affect us. So everybody's a little bit different. But the goal is, if you're real sick, is to get up to that gram a day. If we've got something like diabetes or high blood pressure, then we take it until our diabetes goes, or until our sugar comes to normal, or our blood pressure comes to normal, or whatever the case may be. So the treatment is almost always the same.
What about a maintenance dose? Is that something that After
Absolutely. Maintenance doses are something, especially with cancer patients, that are absolutely mandatory through our experience. In our opinion, we've seen many people that have had a lot of success with cancer in cannabis oil, and then they turn around and quit the oil, whether it be because they run out or they don't have access or they just don't want to take it anymore. And in many cases, that cancer comes right back. And anytime cancer comes back, it comes back strong.
Right.
So.
Well, Peter, thank you for your hard work over the years. I've seen you around the internet for a long time, and it's just my pleasure to be able to tell your story today, and congratulate you and the others who fought hard for Michigan legalization for medical and for adult use. So, anything else you'd like to end with, and can you give out some contact information, please?
Sure. Well, I guess the most important point I was trying to make with the cannabis oil and the cannabis camp story is, I evolved from there into Seed to Cure and now into the Michigan Marijuana Seed Club. But ever since we discovered the true medicinal powers of cannabis, it's been all about the education for me. And that's really where my passion is. And that's in teaching other people and sharing the experience, strength, and hope that I have. So with that being said, you can find me on Facebook. I have a public figure page under Uncle Pete on Facebook. I also have my personal page at Peter O'Toole. And our website also has contact information on there. Once again, that website is MichiganMarijuanaSeeds.org.
Uncle Pete, Peter O'Toole, congratulations on the legalization of adult use that started today. I wish you the best, and I wish you great health, and just continue helping people. I know how good that feels. I thank you very much for your time today.
Hey, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, and you have yourself a great day.
Sure. One more thing. In the rules for adult use, consumption lounges, places for people to go, or not?
Yes, those are all in the works, and that's where it's going to be at for now, is those compassion clubs and lounges and stuff like that, where people are still free to possess and use, but not necessarily buy.
Excellent.
And unfortunately, that just kind of puts you right on the black market where we've always been.
Right. Well, that's also, black market also will survive if people get greedy in the dispensaries and charge too much, and if the taxes are too high. It sounds to me like Michigan has that figured out, because 10% on top of the regular is being a total of 16 is not that bad. Anyway, again, Uncle Pete, Peter O'Toole, thank you very much. It's the MichiganMarijuanaSeeds.org. Check it out. You can have different club memberships and so forth, and even for people that aren't in Michigan, there's stuff for you to learn there. So, Uncle Pete, thanks a lot, man. We'll be right back after this.
Go cut it with a knife. I don't know, Mama, can you lift me up?
medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show.
Well, I want to thank Peter O'Toole, Uncle Pete, and I want to congratulate him for his hard fight, his legal win, and of course the people of Michigan, congratulations on having medical and adult use cannabis. Also want to thank my two radio mentors, both with the initials HS. Thank you for your inspiration. If you'd like to be on the show, if you have a story to tell, a product to sell, a website, you're an activist, an advocate for cannabis, write me at info@mmjradio.com. info@mmjradio.com. We're going to be starting our 10th season in January, just a few weeks from today. If you want to see some of our old shows, listen to them, medicalmarijuanaradio.com, mmjradio.com. My YouTube channel is LSLove88. Also, SoundCloud and Spreaker, we're MMJ Radio. On CannabisTube.net, we have a channel. Also, On Now TV channel 937. That's on TV channel.com channel 937. And the Canna channel coming very, very soon.
The medical marijuana.
Shalom.
Peace and love, everybody. Peace and love. And chaos where it needs to be. Oh yeah, and fuck Trump. I have a feeling he'll be gone soon.